Welcome to the Digital Transformationists podcast. On this episode, we talk with industry luminary Parul Saini. With more than 15 years working in some of the most exciting companies in the world, including Director of Information Technology at Splunk, Parul has had a front row seat to how innovation and technology are changing every facet of our lives. She talks with G-Love and Christian on the big lessons of big data, how AI is already transforming our daily interactions, going from the age of search to the age of suggestion, and how machine learning could one day make a hit record. Today's episode is brought to you by Botron Atlassian Apps, an AppFire company. Botron recently partnered with Jira expert and Atlassian community leader Rachel Wright to create the ultimate guide to Jira migrations. It's packed with checklists, worksheets, and expert-level guidance to help organizations move from Jira Server to Data Center or Cloud with confidence. You can learn more and download your free copy by searching for Botron ebook in your favorite search engine or going to botron.io/Percipio podcast.
Garrett, good morning. It's good to see you again.
Good morning, Christian. Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, man. Let's talk about big data.
I have some statistics.
Oh, do you? What
that,
you got?
Katie, our producer, sent. It's an article from Forbes
Uh-huh.
about data. I'm just going to read off a couple to get us going here. We send 16 million text messages every minute.
A minute?
There's 990,000, for all you single people out there, Tinder swipes per minute. Okay? Every minute, this is for all you people that are working hard on your computer. Every minute there are 103,447,520 spam emails sent.
It's pretty precise. 520.
Venmo processes 51,000 peer-to-peer transactions. Here's one that shows you about my industry. All those big numbers, and Spotify adds only 13 new songs per minute.
Wow. It's crazy. We're producing a lot of data, and that's everywhere from like the consumer and its interactions with the kinds of services you described, down to all the machines and network equipment and apps running on either on physical servers, perhaps less and less, and more on the cloud. We're generating tons of data, something like 2.5 quintillion bytes daily. And all that data, if you process it, if you look at it, analyze it, it can actually provide information. And that's kind of a little bit of the topic we want to talk about today. In music, there are certain patterns and progressions and things that sound good to us. An example of that is the blues 1-4-5, right?
Yeah,
Tell us
basically
about that pattern.
That's basically if I was going to show Parul how to play, if she didn't know, I was going to say, well, let me teach you how to play every rock and roll and pop song ever written. I would teach her 3 chords. G, C, and D. And that would pretty much get her everything from Twist and Shout to Wild Thing to whatever Beyonce's latest hit is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah,
Well, it's these patterns and harmonics that sound good. We can really look for patterns in data as well. And when the pattern is off, know that something might be wrong, or maybe even that something's actually going perhaps better. But patterns allow us to understand data and process it, manipulate it, and extract information.
Actually, I just have one other musical data thing I had read a couple weeks ago that just popped into my head was that they did a data crunch and to what makes a hit song, right?
Right.
But they did it around the lyrics, and the lyric contained most hit songs. You saw that? Did you send me that? Oh yeah,
I don't think I did, but I did.
Yeah,
I watched it.
And it was you, and it was the certain use of the word "you," like I would die for you. I would die for you. It has to be that type of usage.
Gotcha. Yeah, things resonate. Patterns matter.
Yeah.
So let's introduce Parul. Parul, good morning. Parul is out on the West Coast, Director of Information Technology over at Splunk. Thanks so much for getting early and joining us. And by way of introduction, this is Garrett Dutton, Mr. G Love.
Nice to
Hi,
meet
Garrett.
you, Parul.
Nice
Hi,
to meet
good
you as
morning.
well. Good morning.
Good morning. So data, we're amassing tons of it and trying to extract information out of it. That requires a lot of processing. And, more and more, we're becoming more and more data-centric in terms of our decision-making. Tell us, you've had a huge, phenomenal career going back for your early days at Data Consultancy to Adobe to PwC, Zora, now Splunk. What have you learned along the way about data?
Gosh. Let's see. When we lived in the world of, data center, when cloud didn't exist, when real-time processing didn't exist the way it exists today, data was analyzed more in a static way after the fact.
Right.
So when, in my days of when I was a systems engineer, if there was an issue, I had to go look at logs to figure out after the fact and trace patterns of activity across the systems.
So much noise.
So much noise. And wasn't easy to do because I didn't have a parsing tool that I could just feed all the sources into and look at sort of, to your point, a pattern. Mm-hmm. So that was my early interaction with data, trying to understand who touched my systems, what happened, was it legitimate exercise or not? Also, the uptime, you talked about uptime in one of the questions. So uptime of systems and staying on top of it. And when I was an engineer, I actually used alerting on my systems in a way that I could predict, or just by looking at how the logs were generated and what kind of alerts I was getting, I could predict if a system was going to go down just by looking at that. But it was so manual. I literally had to look at my logs on a continuous basis to predict that. Over a period of time, as the tools sort of progressed and became more mature, it made our lives easy. So what I learned about data was not only you can make your systems more stable, predict what is going to happen in terms of the uptime or availability of the system, but also today we're using data to make a lot of business decisions as well, right? So there is a lot that we can do with data. And I this morning, I learned so much about how data is used in music. I had no idea. So that is something I will look into after this episode, learn more about that.
Well, yeah, if you can crunch some more numbers, Parul, and get down to more detail on how to create the perfect hit song, that would be greatly appreciated.
I will I will try to do that.
Well, I was trying to think through my my memory banks of G's catalog. Do you have some songs that titled you?
I'm
putting you on the spot here.
I know, put me on.
We'll come back to you.
Yeah, come back to me on that.
Sorry, Parul, you were saying?
Oh no, I was just saying challenge accepted, Garrett.
Challenge accepted.
I'm sure we can build a machine learning model to be able to do that.
But you brought up a really good point. We used data just to understand things after the fact, and really log files, machine type stuff. And we could say, well, over the past 2 years, because we've indexed and analyzed all these logs, we see a pattern, and perhaps we can say July 4th of 2021, something's going to happen because it's a holiday, or who knows, right? Sometimes those things coincide. And as we advance that ability to the business space, what kind of examples do you have in terms of how we can perhaps apply this kind of technology to get some predictive analytics on business?
It's used in many different ways. I think an example that I picked that I wanted to talk about today was risk and fraud detection, just because financial systems are becoming more and more common, right? And it's in the news, especially after last year. And this is an area of expertise for what my husband does. So I'm intimately familiar with that area. So risk and fraud detection has become an area for financial systems where they're increasingly using machine learning models. What that means is we can look at data and look at a user activity. So for you, Christian, I can look at what kind of transactions you're making on a weekly basis. Where are those transactions being made? And I can analyze your patterns over a period of year. And I know whether you are a high risk customer or low risk customer. And if there is an anomaly, today you're using your credit card in Bay Area and tomorrow you're using it in Germany, or maybe an hour later you're using it in Germany, that is an anomaly. That is a risk and a fraud that we can flag in systems. And the more data you generate over a period of time, the more the models can learn, the more intelligent they can become. And if you think about it in terms of business terms, companies can use this data to reduce fraud. And that is a huge sort of number when it comes to bottom line revenue that they lose by fraud. So that is one of the examples of how data is used, and to your point, in terms of how we can make intelligent systems that can predict something that would happen before it happens.
Wow, very cool.
So just to be clear, that's a form of AI.
That is a form of AI.
Okay.
That is correct.
And so this is.
Hey, Garrett, I have another example of AI for you that you would appreciate. There is a system that was released last year called GPT-3. It's a machine learning model, language processing machine learning model. You can actually feed it some information and it can generate the rest of the text for you. So if you want to train that model to write hit lyrics for you, you could actually do that. I have not tried it personally, but I've seen GPT-3 generate articles that are being published now. But that is a text generator that you can try and produce your, hit lyrics with.
So we have a kind of a basic form of that on our iPhones, right? When we're sending a text message, you can just pick the next word that's coming. Text. So that's that same thing, but on a lot more detailed level. So actually, they're publishing articles. So then who gets the writing credit for publishing those articles?
That is a question that I don't think I am the right person to answer. But I think the machine and the human both get credit because you are the one feeding the data or having the model to do something. But at the end of the day, yes.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, at the end of the day, it is you as a human being that's directing the machine to get you the output you want. So I think the credit goes to both parties.
There's conversations happening out there about this particular topic, right? Can AI and machine learning and all this eventually, actually be creative, right? That's, I'm not sure how threatening it is to your career, G, but hopefully it won't come around fast enough.
Well, actually, if you look behind me, right over my shoulder, this painting right here, just on this very topic, that's by this street artist named Katsu, Katsu. And actually, that's a AI painting because he programs his drone, right? And the drone's trying to paint a picture of Marilyn Manson. No, I'm sorry, not Marilyn Manson, Marilyn Monroe. Sorry, Marilyn Manson was in the papers last week.
You could have said anybody.
But that's supposed to be Marilyn, the drone's AI version of Marilyn Monroe. So that's a real life application. But another bite I just read was that 90% of the world's data. All right, 90% of the data in the world was generated in the last 2 years. So it looks like you're in the right business.
Yes. This is a good time to be in the business of data for sure. For sure. Data is very powerful. And if you've sort of paid attention to what the social media platforms do, they can actually create your entire life based on the data patterns that they can pick out of the systems that you're using, right? So being able to track what you do, being able to predict what your behaviors are now and what they're going to be, it's very powerful that they can create that entire life for you using your data.
Well, thanks to big data, we also have the ability to understand the human genome. We've been able to develop antivirals and vaccines and everything very fast, thanks to technology and the ability to compute and process data. Do you have any other ideas on how how big data can be leveraged. Maybe they're outside of like the social media space, or biotechs. I mean, is going to be huge. We've got this next.
One of the examples that I was looking at recently was looking at this labor statistics data over the period of last 10 years to see how many hourly wage workers in a certain state make less than minimum wage, and how has that changed over a period of time as the economic situations have changed, right? So that is one example of how you can use the data. I think today, in today's day and age after COVID, it's become especially important to be able to predict those patterns. As the job market is becoming tough, it's going to get easier, but it is right now very tough. So where do you concentrate your effort? Like if government was trying to concentrate their effort, where do you concentrate your effort to create jobs more in the short term? Where is the biggest need and pain point, right? So that would be another example of how data can be used.
Cool.
I mean, it seems like with all the data that's available, right? I mean, how come it's a tremendous asset and tool to just solve so many problems that the world faces. You just said like the job crisis. I mean, everything's being crunched constantly. You'd think there would be more people tuning in and listening to what the data's saying and actually saying, okay, this is the heart of the problem and this is the fix. I mean, the data's in a sense providing us with a roadmap to how we can improve so many parts of our world and the human existence, so.
And we are, a lot of companies do that in the back end. They may not be able to share that more commonly or openly, right? Because the data is at the heart of every technological and innovation that you see happening in the world right now. Self-driving cars is an example. It is possible because of a technology called machine vision, which is actually taking images of the environment and training models based on those images. So that is a lot of data that those companies have to deal with and train the systems with. So there is a lot more activity definitely happening in that space over the last 10 years, right? Because processing power in the systems is very important for us to be able to process data. So as the processing power is becoming more and more readily available, data crunching is becoming easier. So that is another trend that's actually taken off in the last 10 years, which is why we're talking more about machine learning or AI models now than in the past.
So another question I have is, so how do large parts of the kind of world population that don't have access to the internet, that don't have an iPhone attached to their fingertips every second of the day, are they going to get lost? Are they going to get lost in the shuffle? I mean, because if there's no one recording their data, right? That's the it's poverty. I mean, how are these people not going to get lost?
A lot of developing countries, and I can speak about India. If you remember, there was a demonetization wave that happened in India a few years back. Mm-hmm. During that wave, there was an attempt by the government to create something to the effect of social security numbers, much like what we have in the US. They're creating that kind of identity number or identification for everyone that lives in India, to give them that unique ID and put more emphasis on digitizing the financial systems that existed there. Everyone in India, as an example, has access to cell phones now because the companies there have invested in building out that network. Reliance Industries is one such industry. They started working on creating this network of cell phones 12 years back, I believe, and they've done really, really well over the years. So developing countries actually are in a better situation to create that infrastructure that's needed to support the advent of internet or access of internet to people. It is still in progress, but they are on the right track to be able to do that. So we won't necessarily leave anyone behind. It's a matter of developed countries helping developing countries get there faster, which is continuing to happen. The lines are getting closer together, and the restrictions are being lifted a little bit, if you will.
So, Parul, one of the things that you've been responsible for is the collaboration tools. What are you seeing in that space? And obviously, I was telling Garrett leading up to this, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the changes we made to work from home and COVID, because we've talked about it so much. I'm kind of getting tired of it, really, but as we all are. But what are some of the things that you're seeing in the collaboration space, and how important are these tools becoming?
I think it's the COVID situation last year has brought increased awareness around these tools, right? How important these tools are. Zoom as an example that we're using right now. And it's taken some of the fear away from the tools. There was always an emphasis for face-to-face human interaction before COVID. But now that option has been taken away, the collaboration tools are becoming a part of life. And people are finding it's actually easier to connect with a lot more people on Zoom than meeting them face-to-face in a day. So that fear has been taken away. The other thing that I'm noticing, at least in my world, is it's becoming very important to measure productivity. How are we spending our time? Are we spending our time on the right things? And again, it goes back to the point of data. How do I collect data to be able to predict that, or actually assess in real time if you're doing the right things? So there is a need for more tools to emerge in that category. So that is a thing that I'm seeing as a gap. So for existing technology stacks that we have, like Atlassian Stack and Jira, which is already used for task management to a large extent and managing projects to a very large extent, if we were to make these tools a little bit smarter, and they could do much like a predictive analytics of the data in a system for a specific project, and predict what the patterns would be for a certain team that's working on a project, I think that would be really helpful for people like me. So I would like to see more happen in that space. The other sort of need that I saw emerging last year was around a social media platform, but for corporations or companies, right? So right now we have social media platforms like Facebook that has a lot of our personal information. I would not want to necessarily share that with my colleagues. And then we have LinkedIn, which is a lot of professional information, but it's very professional. There has to be a middle ground. So if you're going to be digital first or remote first or virtual first, how do you get to know the other individual? There has to be something in the middle that I can share with my colleagues, which is outside of just the LinkedIn profile, a little bit more about me, but not so much that I'm letting them in my personal life, right? So I feel like that platform is something that's missing.
Well, there you go. Let's start working on it now and make $1 quintillion.
We'll add a music component to it, Garrett. I think that will be the differentiator.
Well, for us, Slack has filled that, at least in our company. There are channels that are specific to. We've got one called COVID Stocks Stay Strong, and folks just go there and share pictures of what they're doing over the weekend, what their plans are, and just doing things to kind of just keep people looking forward to the good things and the positive things, and encouraging each other through it. And whether people bring in personal things or not, it's kind of up to them. But for us, the social part of our business is largely in Slack, outside of Zoom, calls and stuff like that. I listened, I don't know if you saw it or not, but Scott and Mike from Atlassian just did a podcast, How I Built This, on NPR. If you get a chance, give it a listen. It's really good. But they touched on, the fact that everyone can work from home now and going permanently, but they still want to give people the space to work in an office if that's what they choose to do. And also focus on the importance of human interaction being on to connect, not necessarily to work, right? So we need to connect to work, but that's not like the human piece necessarily, but you got to create space for connection. What do you think the post-pandemic world will be like? Will we get together just for cocktails and then just go back to Zoom and Jira to work, or?
Yeah, I think There will be more of a hybrid model, and I'm sure you guys would have talked about this in your previous podcast, right? The way companies will design systems and tools, or just basic productivity tools, and they will think about securing their environment, would be based on virtual first, because that makes you think about the different use cases and scenarios, right? So the emphasis would be going virtual first, but the operating model would be hybrid, because you do want to give people option to go to office to have that human interaction. But that will be an option. That would not be a necessity as it is today.
Yeah.
And in terms of resources, I think I see corporations become more and more amendable to having more remote resources, so we can tap into a more diverse workforce. And I think that diversity will help us in a really, really good way. The other thing for leaders, especially like me, will have to learn a whole new skill of tapping into that EQ that we've built over the years, but we have to take it to another level, because now we are working with people that are remote. And we have to make sure that there is a connection between the team members, the old and new. They are feeling motivated, encouraged, and connected with the team. And also, they continue to feel like they're part of a team. And that is something that I have to do a lot more with my team now, as I had to in the past. It's very easy to do that when everybody's co-located, very hard to do when you're doing it remotely. So we have to develop this another skill. We have to hone in and tune into like the human emotions and actually help support the teams in the right way, so that they feel like they're part of one big system. They're moving towards the right goals. So I think that is something that leaders will need to pay more attention to, on how to develop that skill even more.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to like the whole it's kind of a theme I keep coming back to, not to be negative, but yeah, like you can imagine that some people, right, are not going to be able to I mean, you have to change with the times, obviously, but if some people are not self-motivated, right, it's a tremendous time of self-motivated. Like you have to, if you're, no one's watching over your shoulder, if you need a boss over there, he or she is not here, so you're your own boss. So it's, yeah, and it kind of brought me back to a question I had, just to that point, you know, like, you can track people's productivity, right? I mean, and so for instance, in the workplace, are people tracking, or companies, are they tracking tracking the data of the productivity of their teams?
It gets complicated if we want to track it like that, because productivity can be defined many different ways, right?
Wait, sorry. I was gonna say, like, is there tools to say, oh, well, look, G was doing the podcast, well, he acted like he was, but actually he was on Facebook for that whole last segment. Like, can you track people like that?
I'm sure it's possible, but that is not what corporations typically do, because then we get into the issue of privacy of data, right? At the end of the day, anyone that's working for a company is, if you're looking at, say, they're accessing Facebook, that's their private data. So we have to be cautious in terms of what do we track and to what extent do we track it. If we were to get data from different sources and log it into a real-time system and sort of try to predict productivity, I'm sure it's possible. It's a matter of whether or not it's the right thing to do, right? The other complication we have there is, how would you measure productivity? So if you were spending an hour on this podcast, do I quantify that as productive, or do I quantify that as non-productive? Could you have wrapped up this podcast in 30 minutes? Do I want to add efficiency?
I told you.
Well, that's just it, right?
I was trying to get him to do it longer.
You also want to focus on outcomes, right? More than anything, as opposed to what are you spending is it you spend time on Facebook or not? Like, at the end of the day, who cares, as long as you're getting the outcomes that you're looking for. We can measure to some extent productivity type things in something like Jira in a software development context. You can look to see how much work is getting done. in favor or in service to getting features out, to making the product better, right? So you start to drive your team towards just building a better product, right? And looking for specific outcomes towards building a better product. And that's what you start to really focus on. But something like Jira, we can understand velocity in the case of story points and how many units you're cranking out to get something released every 2 weeks. So there's ways of looking at productivity in the tooling. But again, while that's the case, that can help you understand capacity and things like that. But I think that the general thing is to focus. The general intent is to focus on outcomes more than anything.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and let people do what they need to do to get to that outcome.
Sure.
Right, and give people some flexibility and some room to explore their own boundaries and what they can really bring to the team or the company. So Pearl kind of touched on towards the beginning how we used to look at log files to look at things after the fact. And in those days, we had more room and time to figure out root cause and to get a system back up and running because our SLA was in service of day-to-day users within the business on an 8 to 5 schedule, right? Now the demands are that I can move money from one savings account to another when I want to, whether it's because I'm up at 5 a.m. or because I just need to buy something right now, this second, whatever that might be. So the expectations of availability of the services that we're bringing and how we go, how we conduct business has changed dramatically, right? I used to worry about my shop being open from 8 to 6, and that's when you could buy my widgets at my store. Well, now all that has moved online, and again, someone wants to buy something at 2 a.m, like it better work at 2 a.m, right? So that is driving a lot of these pressures to always be on. And with that, we need great tools and technologies to do so. We kind of talked about it in our last episode with Daniel. Ultimately, as the bottleneck moves around, it comes back down to humans' ability to support systems. So maybe we can talk about automation. We can talk about other things that we're doing to augment and strengthen our abilities without so much reliance on humans, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we have been, in the corporate world, we have been designing to support systems more globally for a very long time now.
Right.
I would say since 2000s, that's how every system is designed.
Yep.
SLA, the SLAs that I was held accountable to from the very beginning of my career was, 3 nines, because we were serving sort of, all the companies were global. Take Adobe as an example when I was there. It becomes easier now in my mind for us to be able to hire workforce that is more global. So I don't have to have my team work in night shifts, as an example, that is based in Bay Area. And it's a very common thing for any engineer to be on call. Yeah. The concentrated in one location and have them on call. And if I only have 2 people in my team, they're constantly on call, right? So with my ability to hire people across the globe, if we are truly creating a virtual first environment, we're building tools, systems, and processes to enable a remote workforce, it becomes easier for me to hire people remotely, onboard them in a very effective way, make them part of a team that is working effectively, and then enable that follow the sun or global support model more easily. So I think that's super helpful. And in my case, because I also support collaboration services for different geographical locations, having a support person in EMEA present there locally to support the people, because he or she will understand the culture better, is very helpful for somebody like me to have a support person that can actually connect to people in that location. So that is just becoming easier with us going remote first to virtual first.
So one thing about following the sun, in the world of critical care, ICUs and things like that, one of the riskiest times is actually at the transition of care from one caregiver to another, right? The nurse, the PA, the doctor, and a lot of what they do is they spend a lot of time and effort on that handoff, because that's where the most risk is introduced. What can you share about good handoffs so that you're not dropping the baton or the ball, as they say, handing off to EMEA and then EMEA handing off to Asia or something?
Yeah. I think that's more pertinent when we are rolling out new tools. So one of the things that we did at Splunk was enable Zoom. Or roll out Zoom. This was almost 3 years back now. So we have, in order to support people in these different geographical locations when we're rolling out new tools, we create support systems such as channels on Slack, such as doing a handoff, to your point, using checklist to support staff that is helping us across the globe, such as creating Zoom sessions so that people can join in and ask questions, and we train the users on the new tools that we're rolling out. But a lot of it is dependent on us being very crisp in the checklist or the handoff checklist.
Such an old school, simple tool, checklist.
And I think any operations person has to live by checklists, because
Absolutely.
you can do the same job for many, many years. You will guaranteed you'll forget one step, right?
Yeah.
Which is
or
the
to get
critical
distracted
step.
that one moment. And
Exactly.
just,
Did I or not do that step? I don't know. Or forget altogether. Yeah.
Exactly. So that is important. But now the tools today are actually quite intelligent, right? So the checklist can take the shape of our task list in Jira. So the handoff could be just adding a comment for the next person to pick up and run with. So it's becoming more and more easy. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of the tools, right? Existing set of tools for enabling work going forward have to become smarter. They're very good right now, but they have to become smarter. So one of the things that I was talking about earlier was predictive analytics to predict productivity in a system like Jira as an example. But what about moving from search to suggestion? So what I mean by that is, so far we were living in the age of search, right? Google is a very powerful engine. And if I need answers to anything, I will search it in Google and I will get an answer. But now with the advent of AI, we're moving from the age of search to get our answers to suggestion. I have intelligent tools, or I should have intelligent tools that should tell me what to do next. I shouldn't even think about it. So when that time comes, Christian, the checklists will be created by the AI tools and not by human beings anymore. And that AI tool will take care of the transition piece. That actually might be a good idea for us to work on. Now that I think about it.
You're not going to have to think about anything. It's going to
Well,
keep
if
telling
you-
you what to do next. Okay, I suggest...
Exactly.
Right.
Well, if you hadn't heard, you'll be happy to hear that Atlassian's introducing AI into their technology. So expect to see some good things there.
I was not surprised that they were doing that. Yes.
Right, of course.
Very cool.
So you come from India. That's home is India. India's home, and you studied in India. How has that shaped your approach on business and life and technology? Coming into the Bay Area. I asked this because my family's from Mexico, and a lot of my culture and my ways of thinking are rooted in very much in that way. And I think that gives me a different perspective, perhaps, and kind of approach on things. Tell us how this has shaped you and how you see the world maybe differently than most other Silicon Valley folks or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So Indian culture, I think, is very similar to Mexican culture, right?
Okay.
We have big families, and family is the most important thing.
True.
So one of the things that I took away from my culture as I moved to US was always put people first, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about people. Your family is, your friends, who you work with. Work will always get done, but who is doing the work and what kind of connections you're making with people is the most important thing, because that will last forever. Work is point in time. So that is my approach to anything I do in life, which is the connections, the relationships, and people is the most important thing for me. And on that foundation, you can build anything else. And moving to California, I think, was just something that I feel like I got very fortunate with, because of any place in US that I would have picked to move, it was California. And the transition was just super easy, because not for a minute I felt like I was away from home. the colleagues that I had here, the support system that I found. I didn't miss my family. I had my own mini family here already when I moved to US. And I realized California truly is a melting pot, because I could have friends from such, from countries that I would have never come across if I was not in California. And learning from their experiences, from their unique perspectives, just opened this, a path of learning for me that I wouldn't have had access to. And I think moving to US also made me realize the value of human life. Like in US, there was a lot of emphasis on the value of human life, which was very interesting. And also this innate belief in human potential, where anything and everything is possible, right? Like nothing is off limits. And I thought that was just very, very empowering for me. So all that really helped me shape my decisions and my career and in my life.
That's so cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And I guess landing into the Bay Area in your early 20s, I imagine it was early 20s, given you were at Tata for a year and then came to the U.S. I imagine that's a great place to land, right? A lot of fun.
It was good. It was good. Yes.
Very cool.
Fun in a way, though. I was already working when I moved to US, so I didn't really have a lot of time for fun.
Okay.
But it was good. It was good.
So consulting firms like PwC and some like the big five types, or I don't know how many big it is these days. I think it was the big five when I was at least coming up. They tend to grind folks out. Was that your experience? Were you getting pretty well ground up?
Yes, it was, but I chose that on purpose because I did want to go to that training, right? Consulting is a really great training ground because you have to balance multiple things at the same time. You don't have luxury of waiting, right? So you're walking into a new client situation. You have to come up to speed with what was promised, what needs to be delivered, who are the players, building relationships, gaining trust, and then getting your job done.
Well, plus different industries, different like competitive situations, sometimes winning companies, sometimes losing companies are trying to come around. Like, yeah, I tell people that consulting is like 20 careers in one.
Exactly. It truly is. It truly is. So I actually loved that experience. The hard part for me is travel, right? I am a homebody. I don't like to travel that much. I like to travel on my own terms. But that was the hardest part. The job itself was fascinating.
Yeah. Cool. What was the coolest project you got to work on in your consulting days?
So many. I got access to do so many different things, mostly in the strategy space, things around organization design, things around mergers and acquisition assessment, something like building service catalog, building processes, creating financial models. All of the work that I did was super fascinating. And I got to meet some of the most brilliant people, I would say, because they were just super smart, and I learned so much from them.
Very cool. Any music industry work in those days?
No. But Garrett, you may think of me if you if you want anything done.
I absolutely will.
So Garrett, I found a couple songs with you in them. One's "I Love You," and then "Take You There."
Okay, my chance. Take you there. That's right.
Were they both hits? Were they number one hits?
No, mine? No. I've got a lot of near misses.
We'll try to get you another set of lyrics using one of the AI models.
That'd be pretty cool.
That could be a fun project. Maybe take like the first handful of words of any line, feed them into this. What is it called? GDP3.
GPT-3.
GPT-3. I'm confusing with GDPR. GPT-3. Feed it. Let's see what it comes up with, and then put the music behind it and see what happens.
Yeah, we can do it in real time. We should do it after this podcast live.
Oh, that's pretty cool, man.
That'd be fun. Well, cool. So, Parul, what are you up to these days? How can people find you?
Let's see. Just doing my job, nothing unusual. Trying to, honestly, just waiting to take a vacation where I can actually go somewhere.
Yeah.
Any place that is not my home at this point.
Any road trips planned?
Not at this point. We're really waiting for vaccines to be available more commonly because of all the new variants that are coming up on a daily basis. So just be careful there.
Sure.
But I really want to go to a different place when things open up and take like a real vacation. That's something that I'm really hoping to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer your question, people can find me on LinkedIn using my name. I'm, easily searchable, and on Twitter as well. I don't tweet very much, but I think after this, I will start doing that.
Well, Parul, this has been a lot of fun. Very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and of course, getting up so early. Real good to see you.
Thank you so much, Parul. It was definitely a learning experience.
I appreciate that. Thank you both. It was fun being here.
Thanks for listening to the Digital Transformationists podcast, brought to you by Precipio Consulting. Be sure to visit our webpage to check out our other episodes, access show notes and links, and listen to some great bonus content. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And tell a friend. We love making new friends. I'm executive producer Katie Thomas. Victor Vargas is our engineer. Alejandro Caballero is our editor. Thanks for tuning in.